Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and this video is going to be a first look as well as my first impressions of this 3D printer here from WonderMaker. This is called the WonderMaker ZR. It's a multicolor 3D printer, and you may not have heard too much about this printer. And to be honest with you, I didn't hear too much about it either, but apparently it was a crowd-funded printer some while back, and it's now available to purchase. And there's a couple places that I've seen it available from right now. First place is going to be Sainsmart, where they are selling this printer for $630. And the second place is going to be Amazon, that sells it for a more expensive price for $750. But the last time I checked, there was a 10% off coupon that brings the price down a little bit. But it looks like Sainsmart is going to be the cheapest price at this time. And if you live in the US, the website says that it's going to be free shipping as well. So this printer, there's more to talk about besides just what it does, what are the specs, what it's capable of, and what do the prints look like. Because when I got this, and I put up a community post showing that I got this printer, I was informed that there's a little bit of controversy behind this printer. And through doing a little bit of digging, I found that there is a Facebook group that is filled with people who have backed this printer on Kickstarter, and they are not feeling too confident about how things are turning out here due to some communication issues that have been going on with the company and some of the people who pledged support to beta test it, as well as some other people who had gotten their hands on this printer through one way or another and did some videos about it. And the quality of the hardware and of the prints that they were getting left much to be desired. So there is an air of trepidation, of fear, of uncertainty, and nervousness over there on that Facebook group's page. I thought it wouldn't really be proper if I did this video and not address what was going on over there. So even though I wasn't familiar with what was going on at the time, I do still want to make sure that I show you what my personal experience has been like using this printer, and to just be completely honest and transparent about any and everything that goes on with it. Now, if you're interested in looking at some real-time prints for this, I did do a live stream with this printer. It lasted almost 3 hours. It was a pretty good live stream. I did some live printing with it, answered some questions. It was just a good time overall. I'll just leave a link to that in the description. You can check out that live stream, and then, hopefully there can be some information there that can help you out. When it comes to this printer, if you pre-ordered it or if you're thinking about getting it and you just aren't too sure about where to go, considering everything that's going on. Now, with all that being said, let's take a look at this printer, talk about it some more. Now, at first glance, you might be thinking to yourself, man, this looks just like the FlashForge 85X, and it totally does. It has that same open frame, black frame design. You have the badging for the printer right there in the front of the frame. You got the name of the company right there on the bottom in that same color white. And when it comes to loading up your 4 spools of filament, just like the 85X, you load it up on the left side of the WonderMaker ZR. And the way that the whole thing works looks very similar. You've got these 4 PTFE tubes that go through this filament module down into this print head. And then you also have a nozzle wiper on the back. You got a poop chute that's on the back as well. And the whole thing just looks very, very familiar. But there are at least 2 big differences between the 85X and the WonderMaker ZR. The first big difference is literal, and that is the bed size. You can have a build volume of 300 millimeters cubed on the WonderMaker ZR, and that is above average for most 3D printers on the market today that don't have the name Plus or Max in its name. Another big difference is this printer is open source. It runs Clipper. You can easily access Clipper, and that's something that you can't do on the 85X. So it has those 2 big things going for it. Now, as far as the experience goes when it comes to the unboxing, I do have to say I really like the way that WonderMaker decided to put everything together as far as the instructions on how to assemble this printer. Now, the printer is mostly assembled, but there are some things that you still need to put on. For example, you have to put on the spool holders. You need to connect the filament module. You need to connect the filament separator. That is something that is below the filament module. And you need to connect the screen. But all of that is laid out very well inside of the instruction manual. And when it comes to the screws that you need to use to attach these to the printer, they even labeled the bags with the screws on it, clearly labeled so that you can know exactly where they go. And then there's also stickers all around the frame of this printer to let you know what is supposed to go there. Like right here, there is an air filter assembly holes. There's 2 of them. So if you wanted to get that accessory, you know it goes right here. It tells you where the spool holders go. It tells you where the filament module goes, and everything is very easy to follow along. They even go so far as to tell you which filament tubes should go into which slot on the filament module, because they are not all the same size. So they let you know that the shorter tubes go into a couple of spots on here, and then the longer tubes go into 2 different spots. And I like that, because it may seem like a small thing, but laying out very precise, specific instructions like that is what makes the entire experience a lot less intimidating. And it just kind of goes to show a little bit more attention to detail that I do appreciate when it comes to printers like this. Now, the other specs about this printer are not necessarily groundbreaking, but it does help it to stand up to some of the other printers that are on the market today. For example, when it comes to speed, it has a max speed of 300 millimeters per second squared, acceleration 20,000 millimeters per second square, and the travel speed is going to be 600 millimeters per second squared. So, pretty much what we're used to. But with this printer, they do include, just by default, a 0.4 hardened steel nozzle that comes as default, with the hot end going all the way up to 300 degrees Celsius. And then the heat bag can go up to 100 degrees Celsius. And even though this is a completely open frame, there is an enclosure kit that's going to be available for this for an extra price, of course. And you don't have to print anything for this enclosure kit. It just comes with these panels to cover all of the sides, a door that goes in the front, and of course the big old dome that's going to go on the top with enough space, hopefully, to clear these tubes so that that won't be an issue. So all of those things combined makes this printer look very, very similar to the AD5X, while doing some things that I think the community would have wished the AD5X would have been, such as the larger build size and then the access clipper. This printer does auto everything. So that means that when you go to set it up, it's going to do its own leveling and figure that out for itself. It's going to do vibration compensation, and it's going to do some PID calibrations for the nozzle. And you just have to wait for that to go through, and then you will be ready to print. But how do you load the filament? Well, that all happens right here on the left side. So there's a bit of an odd thing they decided to do with this printer. You can load 4 spools of filament, but it only has 2 spool holders. And these 2 spools are separated by a raised portion in the middle of the spool holder that keeps the 2 filaments from touching each other. And all the filaments have to go through this filament separator, and then they will go through the filament module. Now, I did see another video from another creator who took this apart and found out that the filament separator houses filament runout sensors. And apparently at this time, if you do not use the filament separator, then you won't be able to actually print, because you need to use that. So that's something that you should definitely know about. But when you're feeding the filament through the filament separator, and once you get past the threshold in the filament module, that's when the printer will grab the filament and pull it all the way down to the tool head. It'll go all the way down to the bottom, and then it will retract itself. It does that for all 4 filaments. And that brings me to the first issue that I heard about these spool holders that hasn't happened to me yet. I've only had the printer for like 3 days. But one thing that can happen is when the filament retracts, especially if your filament is very full, there's a possibility that when it retracts, the filament might be able to go over the edge of the spool and get caught up back there. And of course, that means that it is going to bind. It can cause some extrusion issues, and it just may cause the filament to just get trapped, and then it'll be a print failure because no filament is going through. I did see on the Facebook page that WonderMaker is working on some different spool holders that do spring. So I don't know if they are going to ship those out to people when they're done. I don't know. It's just something that I saw. And so I definitely wanted to point that out. This has a pretty impressive touchscreen. It's a capacitive touchscreen, so it feels more like your phone as opposed to the resistive touchscreens that you would find on something like the AD5X. And it also has a spot for USB on the side, so you're able to take your sliced files in that G code and you can stick it in that way. One other thing that you can do is access Clipper either in your web browser, or you can use Orca Slicer, which is what I've been doing, to type in the IP address for this printer, and then you'll have access to Clipper and you'll see the fluid interface. And then you're also able to just send your files wirelessly from Orca Slicer to this printer if you don't want to plug in a USB stick manually. And that whole thing has just gone very smooth for me. And this will also be a good time to let you know that I am very fortunate that I have not had any issues with this printer yet. I've not had any crashes in the firmware. I have not had the nozzle crash into the bed. I've not had any issues printing multicolor. It has not gotten confused when it comes to what colors it should use. I've checked to see if the Z-axis was loose and wobbly. It is not loose. It does not wobble. The X-axis is not loose. It does not wobble. It has been a very sturdy machine. I know some people have not had that experience, but for me, it's been the complete opposite. No failures on this printer so far. I have not used any glue on the bed. I've just been printing like I normally would. In fact, I want to show you some things that I printed on here so far. Now, some of these things I've showed in the live stream, but I'll re-show them here for you, and some new things that I printed on here since that live stream. Now, the very first thing that I printed on here was this little bookmark that came on the printer. It was like the very first sample print. And one weird thing about this bookmark, even though it came out, fine, is that it tells you that this is a single color print. But when I printed it, it actually swapped colors and it was actually a dual color print. And I had some matte filament on here as well as some regular non-matte filament, and it just randomly decided to use the matte filament on top of this black non-matte filament that I had. So that's how it turned out. It looks okay. I think because it used that matte filament instead of anything else, it's not showing through as good as I would like for it to show through, but this was the first print and it was a success. No problem there. The second thing that I printed was a tolerance test directly from Orca Slicer. And as I showed in my live stream, the way that this works is it prints out this piece here with all of these holes and then a peg piece that you can put through the holes. I was able to put that peg through all the holes. It just went straight through like nothing was there on the 0.4, 0.3, 0.2, and 0.1 holes. Once I got down to 0.5, I was able to push the peg in so that it can be nice and flush, but it will not go all the way through until I force it through. And then once you get down to 0, it's going to take a lot more effort to put it through 0 if it will ever go through at all. So that was the tolerance test for this. I think that tolerance test turned out pretty good. The other thing that I tried to print was 4 colors, a Hue Forge print from this video game called Mega Bonk. So Hue Forge, I think, is a really good way to just see how good the printer will be able to print details to bring out a nice photo. And it did this very well. And as you can see, we've got black on white. And as I look at this, I don't see any like color bleeding in between the different colors. It came out really, really good. And then the first layer on the back of this is smooth as an egg with butter wrapped around it. You know, it's just super smooth. I really like this, and it came out great. It was a really good impression for me when it came to a multicolored print. And then here's another multicolored print that I did actually live. This is of Mario from Super Mario Brothers 3. It is just a small print that's meant to be a magnet, and it used 4 colors. And this also turned out looking very nice. On the back, however, this was the top layer, because the actual part with Mario's face and everything, it printed face down. But on the top layer, you can see that it is a little bit streaky right here. But as far as the part that you're actually going to see, it looks really, really good. Very, very nice. I also decided to print this Christmas ornament, like this Mickey Mouse Christmas ornament. This was also done during the live stream, and again, it came out fine. This was 3 colors, black and yellow and red, and no huge problem with this particular print. And then I'm also working on a big 12-inch Proto Man figure, and that's when I brought out some PETG from Polymaker to print these parts. I'm still working on it, but this is just kind of like the upper part, and this is his lower part here. And even printing with PETG with nothing but generic profiles in Orca Slicer. So for these other prints, it was the generic PLA high-speed profile, and for PETG, it was generic high-flow PETG. I did not tweak anything. I just wanted to see how it would work just with generic everything. And these turned out looking pretty good as well. And the tolerances for these pegs that have to go in, these fit in just perfectly. No issues with these going in, and I'll be able to assemble everything together when it's done. And there were no failures as I was printing these out. Very happy about that. And then also during the live stream, someone wanted me to check for the Z-axis wobble through printing a cylinder that's hollowed out in the middle and just let it go up and up and up. So that's what I did. And this is that cylinder piece here. And it also looks good. First layer is good. It's solid. No problems. No problems at all with this. Now, since I did that, I decided to print some more tests that I promised on that stream that I would do. And here are some of those tests now. Now, this first one here is the Orca Slicer Cube. And this will show you the Y-axis, the X-axis, you'll see the Z, and then you'll also have this little part here that you can just basically screw in to this cube. And it has absolutely no problems screwing in to this cube. It sits perfectly flush. And then you can just take a look here at the Z and the X and the Y and see what you feel about the quality of that. But I'll make sure that you can, take a look at it, and you let me know what you think down there in the comments as well. I also decided to do a torture test, a stringing torture test. And even though stringing can be the result of your filament and maybe not necessarily, the printer, but nonetheless, here's that torture test for stringing. And yeah, we've got some stringing, but they're very light wisps. It's not crazy, but it did print successfully on the first try. These little tips up here look nice and pointy, but this is definitely a stringing test. And let's see, what else do I have here? I wanted to try a overhang torture test as well. So this torture test basically goes from 10 degrees all the way up to 80 degrees without supports to just see how the printer will be able to handle it. And it handled this torture test like a freaking champ. I mean, when you look at this, things don't really start to get weird until you get to 70 degrees. But when you look on the underside, it looks pretty decent. In fact, I would say it looks good all the way up to the 80-degree angle. I think this is really good to be able to say that this printer can print up to this 80-degree angle without supports, without failing. Now, it's not going to look, perfect because, you got some weirdness going on right there at the 80-degree mark. But all things considered, it took it all the way to the top and it did not mess up completely. I think that's good considering a lot of bad things I've seen about this printer. It was able to do this, and I think that that is very good. I also did a VFA test because I saw some people were really curious about the VFAs. Now, the whole thing about VFAs is pretty much every printer has VFAs. So I'm not going to hold it against this printer because it also has VFAs. But we can take a look at this test here. And what I can deduce from this test when you get it in the right light is that the VFAs are most prominent when the printer is printing slower. So what I did was in that test, I had the max speed set to 300 millimeters per second. I had the slowest speed set to 80 millimeters per second. And then I just had to go up by 20 millimeters a second intervals. And as I look at all of these different angles, the thing that is common between all of them is that the worst of the VFAs occurs near the beginning when it's going slower. And the faster the print was going as it goes up, then things start to look a lot cleaner. So if VFAs are something that you are very interested in, it's a very interesting and a complicated as heck topic. The VFAs on here are definitely more prominent when it's slower. Like I said, pretty much all printers have them, but still, I think this is not bad. So yeah, in the few days that I've been working with this printer, I have been pleasantly surprised with what it has been able to do, considering what I've been seeing online and the bad experiences that other people have been having. But that doesn't mean it's going to stay like that. You still have to put this through its paces, still have to try some different filaments, and have to print some larger things with this printer as well to see how it's going to hold up as things get bigger and as things get taller. So that's pretty much going to do it for now. I am going to continue using this printer to see how it performs over time. And then in the future, I'll have a full review and we'll see if this printer managed to hold it together or if it eventually shook itself apart. We'll see. But the very first impressions from these prints that I have done, I have been happy with it. The only thing about this printer is, and one thing I don't think my opinion will change, is that it does not do anything that is groundbreaking. It doesn't do anything that's spectacular or all that much different than printers that are on the market currently right now. But not everything can be innovative and game changing, but it does find itself in a little bit of a weird position considering the price and the upcoming tool changers is going to be the next frontier, but I'm still going to give it its fair shot and we'll see how it turns out. So stay tuned for that and be sure to subscribe if you want to see how things turn out. So that's it for now. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.